All right, so I really want to try and show you how I would tackle these problems with my properties in front of me because your scores on this quiz were probably the lowest that we've had on any quiz so far. So I think it's just difficult because you're trying to put words into math, and that's something that students tend to struggle with a little bit. So let's look at this first question here. ABCD is a parallelogram. AB is 4.7. And BD, the diagonal, is 10.6. What is CD? So if I look at my properties that I can pull up really quickly, the first one says that both pairs of opposite sides of a quadrilateral are congruent. So I'm really trying to focus on the sides because that's what I'm given here. And it says that the opposite sides are congruent. So if BA is 4.7, then CD has to be 4.7 as well. Okay, let's keep on going. ABCD is a parallelogram. What is true about angle ABC? ABC. Select all that apply. So is angle ABC supplementary to BCD? Here's BCD over here. Okay, is it supplementary? Remember, supplementary means that you add up to 180 degrees. And the property says that consecutive angles of a parallelogram add up to equal 180 degrees. Consecutive angles is one right after the other. So I'm here at angle B, and directly next angle could be C. Same thing with A and B. Those two are next to each other. They're also supplementary. So A is correct. It says select all that are true, so we got to read through all of it. So is angle ABC congruent to BCD? Well, we just said that those two angles are supplementary to each other, which means they aren't necessarily congruent, so we cannot select that as our answer. Angle ABC is congruent to BEC. If I go back and I look, here's BEC right here, okay? If I go back and I look at my properties, I don't have any correlation between an inside angle, like we have here, that's created by your diagonals, and an outside angle like ABC. So I cannot assume that. Okay, lastly, angle ABC is congruent to ADC. So these are opposite angles, right? So let's see. I would look at my notes again, and I would check to see if there's anything about opposite angles. So I'm just kind of glancing. This says sides, so I'm not going to worry about sides. I'm not going to worry about sides. Here's one about opposite angles. So see, I'm skimming through my theorems, and I'm kind of skipping the ones that talk about sides because I don't need that. I'm looking at opposite angles. If both pairs of opposite angles of a quadrilateral are congruent, then the quadrilateral is a parallelogram. So the opposite angles of a quadrilateral are congruent. So B and D are opposite angles, therefore they are congruent as well. So A and D is the correct answer for that question. Number 3, which statement about ABCD is not true? So obviously this is a parallelogram because it has all of those little arrows on the sides, okay? So what about ABCD is not true? Is AB congruent to DC? Yes, that is true, right? We already said that with, I think, the first question on this section is that the opposite sides are congruent. Is AC, the diagonal AC, congruent to the diagonal BD? So again, if I'm not sure, I'm taking this test right now. I'm going to look at my theorems right here. I'm focusing in on the diagonals, okay? The diagonals, I'm looking and I see the last property is talking about the diagonals. The diagonals of a quadrilateral bisect each other. Then the quadrilateral is a parallelogram. Okay, is there anything else about diagonals? It doesn't say that they're equal. It just says that the diagonals themselves bisect each other. So let's look at that question again. So is AC equal to BD? We cannot say that that's true. So which statement isn't true? So far, B is not true because there's nothing in our properties that says that they're congruent to each other. It only says that it bisects. So that means these sides would be equal and these sides would be equal. I'm going to continue going through these. AD is congruent to BC. That's true because, again, opposite sides are congruent. And BE is congruent to DE. That's also true because of the last statement that we just looked at that says that where the diagonals cross, they bisect each other. So B was the correct answer for that question. So that's the only one that's not a true statement. Okay, number 4, measurement of LJK is 28. Find the measurement of MLK. Well, I know that this is an angle bisector because I have congruency here. Okay, so this line right here is a bisector. So it's an angle bisector, which tells me that these two angles are also congruent. So if I focus on this question, I see a triangle on the right-hand side that I have two angles, and I'm just missing the third one, right? So what I can do is I know that all the angles inside a triangle add up to 180, right? So I go ahead and combine those, 90 plus 28. I'm going to get 118. And then I'm going to subtract 118 from 180. I feel like this was very similar to a question we did together. So angle L is going to be 62. So I'm going to fill it in on my drawing. I'm going to go back and I'm going to reread the question. And it says, find the measurement of MLK. So if you pick 62, you didn't reread it. That's not correct, okay? Again, since this is an angle bisector, I know that whatever I have on the right side, I also have on the left. Again, there's nothing in here that says that it's an angle bisector. I just know that's true because of these hash marks right here. It's bisecting that angle. Okay, so in order to find the full angle, I would just need to add 62 plus 62, and that would equal angle MLK, and that is 112, or sorry, not 112, that is 124 degrees. So the last one is a solution. Okay, next one. PQ is the perpendicular bisector of MN. So now we're told that it's a perpendicular bisector. What is QN? So they want us to find this right here. Well, if it's a perpendicular bisector, we learned in this unit that the sides would be congruent. So I know that I'm not asked to find anything on these two sides, but if I can figure out my X, then I can plug it into QN to find what they're asking for. So that's where I'm going to start. Because I know it's an angle bisector, then that tells me that those two sides are congruent to each other. I'm going to go ahead and solve for X by subtracting 6X on both sides. Then I'm going to add 17 to both sides, and I'm going to get 4X equals 18. And then I'm going to take my 18 and I'm going to divide it by 4. I'm glancing at my answers down here, and I do notice that I have a decimal, so I'm going to leave my answer in decimal form. And I got X equals 4.5, which wasn't a distractor answer, but could be, okay? And the question, again, was asking me to find QN. So to find QN is 2X 5. So I'm going to replace my X with 4.5. And I'm going to get 9 plus 5, which is 14. So 14 is the correct answer. And that was your quiz for 8.2 and 9.2. Now, lastly, for today's quiz, I have FIHG is a rhombus. What is the measure of FIH, the entire thing here? So I'm going to go ahead and pull up my slide because that's what I would suggest for you guys to do. And I'm going to look at my properties for a rhombus that I have right here. And I'm going to go back to the question really quickly and see if I'm talking about angles or sides for this question. That way I can kind of narrow my search a little bit. Looks like we're talking about an angle, and we're talking about one that is being cut by a diagonal, right? So let's look at our properties for angles. So for a rhombus is a quadrilateral with 4 congruent sides. It's a parallelogram, its diagonals are perpendicular. Each diagonal bisects a pair of opposite angles. That's the one we need. Each diagonal bisects a pair of opposite angles. So right here, If I know that this side is 72, then this side also has to be 72 because it's being bisected. So 72 times 2, or you could do 72 plus 72, you're going to get 144. Okay, now let's look at our isosceles trapezoid. So we're told that this is an isosceles trapezoid, and we're asked what is the value of x? So I'm looking at x, and x is an angle here. And you want to be careful because these look like base angles, but the base angles that are congruent would be this one, and these ones would be a different measurement. So don't start by setting them equal to each other. That could have been probably the mistake that some of you made. Let's look at our isosceles trapezoid. And again, let me glance back at the question. I want to look at angles, right? Angles is my focus. So let's see. Isosceles trapezoid, each pair of base angles is congruent. Okay, so pair of base angles is congruent. And that's all that they say. So what you need to remember is just your information about a quadrilateral. Quadrilateral means that all of the angles add up to 360, right? Or that the angles next to each other are supplementary angles. So what we have here is we have 6x plus 9. These are not the same base angles. You have to be on the same parallel line, and the angles that are congruent are the angles that are touching this parallel line. So only this angle and this angle are congruent. It could be a question, but these two are not going to be equal to each other. They're going to add to equal 180 degrees because consecutive angles add up to equal 180. So now I'm just going to combine. And I'm going to subtract 72 on both sides. And I'm going to divide by 6. And I'm going to get x equals 18. And that is what I was asked for. What is the value of x? The value of x is 18. So just be careful and make sure you understand what a base angle is. Base angle are the ones that share the same parallel line. Okay? The next thing that we learned about for trapezoids was this whole idea of the mid-segment. Okay? So the mid-segment formula means that we're going to take both of the outside edges, and it's kind of like you're finding your average, right? We're going to add them together and divide by 2 to get HK. So my formula for this one would be IJ plus GL divided by 2 or times 1/2, however you guys want to do it, equals HK. So in order to find this, I'm going to go ahead and plug in what I have. We're told that IJ is 2, GL is 6, and HK is what I need to find. So 2 plus 6 is 8. About that. 8 divided by 2 is going to give me 4. So HK is going to be 4. So C was correct for that question. Okay. Number 4. ABCD is a kite. If the measurement of EBC, this little one here that I know I won't be able to write in there, is 30 degrees, what is the measurement of BCE? All right. So if you want to look at your wording or your theorems for kites, you will find that for a kite, the diagonals bisect each other, but the diagonals are perpendicular. Okay? So if my diagonals are perpendicular, I want to look at triangle BEC, and I know that this is 30 and this is 90 degrees because it says that the diagonals are perpendicular. So I can very easily find angle BCE by knowing that all of the angles add up to 180. So I'm just going to combine. I got 120 plus angle BCE equals 180. I'm going to subtract 120 on both sides, and I'll get angle BCE equals 60 degrees. Verify that that's the question they were asking, and it is, so that's your answer. Lastly, we have a rectangle. So again, I could go back. It looks like they're giving me information on my diagonals of a rectangle. I believe rectangles right here, okay? So the diagonals is what I want to focus on. So for a rectangle, I'm looking at the properties and it says diagonals are congruent. So there you go. There's my property. That's how I know what to do with the given information. So I'm given both diagonals, so all I need to do is set them equal to each other. That's your only step of geometry. One step of geometry, and the rest is all Algebra 1 or previous math classes. So you're just going to go ahead and solve from here. Subtract your 9x on both sides, subtract your 8 on both sides, and you get x equals 12. Reread the question. The question is asking for just x, so 12 is correct. All right, you guys, I hope that that was a good review and hopefully I cleared up some of your guys' questions. If you have any questions, make sure you're utilizing the Collaborate form on today's lesson. Have a great day.